Hello. What we will be talking about today is a program called the Mahila Samakhya, which illustrates actually what a good adult education program should be. We will be looking at its history, its salient features, what kinds of activities take place within Mahila Samakhya, and what are some of the outcomes. In 1974, the government constituted a committee which submitted its report, and the committee was called the Committee for the Status of Women in India. It was the first report of its kind in post-independence India, and the report brought out very certain shocking facts which were related to the education of women and the status of women. Although women constitute half of the population of India, this report found that more girls were out of school than in school. Rates of illiteracy were very high. Women were simply not able to access the education system. And some of the core factors for being unable to access the education system were related to social, economic, and cultural constraints that prevented women from getting into the educational system. Child labor was a very common practice. Children did not go to school because they had to work. Young girls were kept in the home to take care of the younger siblings, and women had very few rights, in the sense that although the constitution guaranteed them certain rights and privileges, in actual practice those rights and privileges did not exist. The right to property, for example, and girls were primarily looked upon as subordinate beings who were dependent upon their husbands, their fathers, and their sons. After completion of this module, the learner will be able to understand the structure and the functioning of Mahila Samakhya program, describe some of the important initiatives of the Mahila Samakhya program, critically appreciate the significance of empowering educational processes, and they will also be able to apply the core learnings from the Mahila Samakhya experience to critique, modify, or design an adult education program. The matter of low levels of literacy and education among women was of great concern to the government. So in 1986, the government formulated the National Policy on Education, and one of the prime objectives of that policy was to ensure that girls get access to women and to improve the gender imbalances in education. The plan of action that was formulated by the government after the policy in 1992 actually believed there was a premise behind that policy, behind that plan. And one of the premise was that women's empowerment is critical to improving access to education. The parameters for women's empowerment through education were specified as enhancing self-esteem and self-confidence of women, building a positive image of women by recognizing their contribution to society and the polity and economy, developing the ability to think critically, foster decision making and action through collective processes, enabling women to make informed choices in areas like education, employment, and health, especially in the area of reproductive health, ensuring equal participation in developmental processes, providing information, knowledge, and skill for economic independence, and enhancing access to legal literacy and information relating to their rights and entitlements in society with a view to enhance their participation on an equal footing in all areas. Mahila Samakhya is a unique educational program. One of the fundamental premises underlying Mahila Samakhya is the belief that women are agents of their own development, that women can make informed choices, that women can change the circumstances in which they live. The program was started in 1988, and the socio-cultural economic milieu in which the women live was considered extremely material to the educational process. So essentially, women were considered within their social and economic context, and that is very significant because it made for more flexible programming, taking into account the learner within their social context. Mahila Samakhya engages girls and women in an educational process that essentially provides them the space to sit together, to reflect, and to think. So that space for collective engagement, for discussions, for sharing, and so on, provides actually the opportunity for learners to reflect on their life situations so that they can change their life situations. In fact, the participatory approach of Mahila Samakhya is evident right from the stage of its conceptualization and formulation, because the formulation of Mahila Samakhya took place through consultative processes with government, with NGOs across the country, and that's how the project itself came into existence. And therefore, the whole element of participation and the centrality of the learner is written through the Mahila Samakhya program. Mahila Samakhya started as a pilot program in 1988 and covered 3 states at the time. Today, Mahila Samakhya covers 11 states and 130 districts across the country. In terms of location, Mahila Samakhya is housed in the Ministry of Human Resource Development. Now, this is an extremely significant fact because typically women's oriented programs are confined to the ministries of rural development, confined to social welfare. But here very much Mahila Samakhya is in the mainstream education department, and that is a matter of significance. Although the program is held by the Ministry of Human Resource Development, Mahila Samakhya is implemented by Mahila Samakhya societies that are constituted for the purpose. Now, in each state where it is operational, there is a Mahila Samakhya society, and the society is an autonomous body. So therefore, although the government funds the program, or there are various agencies that fund the program, that the Mahila Samakhya society in each state enjoys some amount of freedom in designing what and implementing the program. The Sanghas are core to the Mahila Samakhya program. The Mahila Sanghas are constituted by the implementing agency, and a whole lot of Mahila Sanghas come together and become the federation, and a whole lot of federations also interact with each other. The idea behind the Sanghas and the federations is that ultimately this is a program that has a life, and that essentially this is a women's program that should take on a life of its own. It should ultimately be owned by the people, by the women members within the Mahila Sanghas, and that is the idea behind the whole system of establishing the Sanghas, federating the Sanghas, and so that later they can continue the work even if the Mahila Samakhya society just provides external support or even withdraws. The Mahila Sangha is the central organization of the core, one could say, of Mahila Samakhya. It has about 20 to 25 women, and most of these women are from the marginalized groups, because that is the focus of Mahila Samakhya. Women who have been excluded, women from the minorities, women from the scheduled castes, women from Adivasi groups are all encouraged to become members of the Sanghas. That is the first step that Mahila Samakhya takes wherever it starts, is to get excluded groups of excluded women, groups of marginalized women into the Sangha. Mahila Samakhya does not promise the members anything. The Sangha members are not told that they will get these benefits and those benefits. There is no kind of enticement for attending the meeting. There is no honorarium, there is no enticement at all for attending the Sangha. What Mahila Samakhya does is to create a space where women can share their concerns, their problems, their issues, and basically dialogue with each other. It is a space for facilitating dialogue. The Sahyogini is the Mahila Samakhya functionary who is responsible for working with the Sangha, for organizing the Sangha as well as conducting meetings and working with them, generally with the members of the Sangha. Now, the agenda is not set by the Sahyogini. The agenda is set by the members themselves, and the concerns are drawn from those concerns of the members. For example, if women feel that the ration shop is not giving them rations, then that can become an agenda item for the Sangha as to how, what are the entitlements of ration, how does one go about getting the rations, has the material come to the ration shop, why are they not getting the rations as per the requirement. That is the way the Mahila Sangha is conducted. This process of facilitation, this process which is called a dialogical process, where people are in dialogue with one another. And that whole process of dialogue with one another means that there is no teacher and there is no learner in that sense. That there is no hierarchy of a learner-teacher relationship. That the Sahyogini and the members of the Sangha are all equal at the same level. One brings a certain amount of knowledge to the table and the others bring their experience, their experiential knowledge to the table. This dialogical process was actually developed by a very famous educationist called Paulo Freire in Latin America. And there is much that he has written on the subject, and this whole process of doing this he referred to as conscientization. The Mahila Sangha is not really just a place where people can sit and talk, because just talking is not going to get anywhere. And that is something that Paulo Freire had brought out very strongly, that it is not just the process of ventilation that happens when people come together, But it is important that that oppressed people act to change their life situations, and that is very significant, very critical. Another element that is very important in what Paulo Freire said was that people must examine their own social reality, must critically examine it, understand the roots of their oppression, and act to change them. This ability to think critically he referred to as conscientization. He also referred to a process of reflection, action, and reflection. What people sit together and do is to reflect, and based on which they evaluate their choices, they get information about what they need to do, they act upon their choices, and they reflect again upon the action that they take. And that is the process which is called praxis. Reflection, action, reflection, which is a continuous process. The Sangha is also the place for learning, participation, and democratic values. Because participation is learnt behavior. Not everybody who is part of a group is able to participate or knows how to participate. And therefore, this levels of participation vary. And by being in this group, by being in the collective is extremely central to Mahila Samakhya as well as to Paulo Freire's system of education, which is that there is collective reflection and collective action. These two elements fall within the realm of Mahila Samakhya. What Mahila Samakhya implements to the Sanghas is an empowering model of adult education. Now, when we refer to empowerment, empowerment is a term that is used very loosely. Actually, empowerment is not an end state, it is a process. And there is a state of moving from disempowerment, where a person feels powerless, to a state of feeling more and more and more powerful. So, there is no end state of feeling powerful. And therefore, we refer to empowerment as a process. And the Sahyogini and the other elements and the programs within Mahila Samakhya facilitate this process. Now, how might this empowering process be assessed? One of the ways to assess it is by looking at the outcomes. And when there was a national review carried out in 2014 by the Ravi Mathai Center for Innovation in Education at the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, what they found was that women shared their experiences at different levels. Of course, they were empowered within the community. I mean, they felt more empowered. People took them more seriously. The oppressed people, took them more seriously in the sense they had inputs to give on what kinds of roads, what kind of amenities. They were participants in the Grama Sabhas. They were elected to the panchayats. And one of the most significant sites of oppression of women is the household. And they also referred to changes within the household. There were women who said that their husbands now do some of the housework. They share in the housework. They take care of the children. They had more role to play in decision making, something that they had not been part of earlier. It is not enough just to look at what kind of changes happened intra-household or within the community, because many of these might be anecdotal evidence. It is also necessary to look at the numbers, because numbers tell their own stories. And if we look at the stories that Mahila Samakhya numbers tell us, we find that there are 55,402 Sanghas with a membership of 1.4 million women. Since Mahila Samakhya's focus is the oppressed, it is necessary to look at who among the oppressed was part of the Mahila Samakhya program. And we find that from the membership of the Sangha, in the membership of the Sangha, almost a third are from the scheduled castes, 21% from the scheduled tribes, 26% from the other backward classes, and 8% from the minorities. So the Sanghas are primarily constituted by the members of the oppressed classes. Now, while looking at the Mahila Samakhya experience, when we talk about, we will be looking at both what worked and what did not work in terms of training methodologies. We will start with what did not work. Mahila Samakhya, the report on Mahila Samakhya states that in many places the anti-alcohol campaign did not work, simply because there was not, that it was not considered important enough, there was not enough follow-up, the women did not buy into the program as much. Likewise, the anti-child labour campaign did not buy into it so much. And this is extremely important for us as adult educators, because quite often we plan programs in a very top-down kind of fashion and imagine that We are doing things that the community might want to know, or things that we believe that the community must get awareness about. So while we do that, it is also important to root the programs that we do in what they feel is important. Now, awareness about legal health and through seminars and so on is not something that got much response within some of the parts of Mahila Samakhya. There is a whole belief that income generation programs are very important to rural women, which they are. But quite often, but income generation is not just about providing training, and quite often collective individual employment training, examples of mushroom production, bamboo production, small activities did not really take off within Mahila Samakhya. This is because it's not just training that is going to enable. There are many more factors other than training that are required to set up enterprise and enterprise development. And if those factors do not exist in that area, then these activities will not take off. Likewise, Mahila Samakhya child rights protection committees did not take off so well. There was an attempt to get women to document their own life stories, and because there was no follow-up and not enough time for documentation, women simply did not have the time, even if they were literate, simply did not have the time and space within their own lives to sit and document their experiences. Even libraries for women, literacy as an activity did not carry so much room within the entire Mahila Samakhya program, in the sense that although literacy was a very important element of Mahila Samakhya, in terms of actually the literacy of adult women did not take off as a major program in that sense. The right to information as well. It is not enough just to awareness and right to information as well suffered from a similar fate, where it is not enough just to give information on the Right to Information Act, but the whole aspect of following through, making applications, getting results, of taking up the issue if results don't come, making appeals and so on. This requires a tremendous level of follow-up, which was not possible, and therefore the right to information awareness also was not so successful. Training of my Panchayati Raj institution members was also something that Mahila Samakhya tried out, but in many parts it did not succeed because women did not have the time to leave their villages and come together to get trained. But in terms of standing for elections, of getting elected into the panchayats, Mahila Samakhya has been immensely successful. Now we look at what worked, and it's very clear that when there are activities that engage people in various educational processes, where people have a role to play, where they are not playing, their role is not to just to sit and listen, but the role demands active participation, and there is actual action involved, that people learn through action oriented processes. Mahila Samakhya's attempt to organize campaigns for admission to schools, campaigns to increase women's participation in local governments, local governance, and the importance of the right to vote for every 18-year-old have been extremely successful. Likewise, singing, dance, drama have been integral to the Mahila Samakhya educational process. The Kala Jatha, women participate in large numbers in Kala Jatha. In fact, the women write songs based on their own experiences, women set tunes to those songs and they sing those songs, and that has been extremely important. Women participate in rallies, particularly on campaigning against violence against women is something that has gripped the imagination of women in Mahila Samakhya. What has worked is also role plays, films, audiovisual aids, things that engage learners, participatory learning and action, mapping of their villages, mapping of their water sources, mapping of who is allowed to, who gets what within the village, resource mapping within the village. All these kinds of things, activities have engaged women much more than purely awareness-based activities. Apart from encouraging women to question existing systems, educational, health and so on, Mahila Samakhya has also devoted a lot, women in the sanghas of Mahila Samakhya have also explored various kinds of alternatives that are more relevant to their ways of life and living. One of the alternatives, educational alternatives that is implemented by Mahila Samakhya is the education program which is called the Mahila Shikshan Kendra, which caters to students in the age group 9 to 14 years. Girls are brought to the residential center and the girls live there for almost a year, 8 months to 12 months in the year, and they do a condensed course of up to classes 1 to 5, so that at the end of the program they have achieved a certain level of literacy. Life skills are also taught in these kendras, and these kendras are managed by shikshaks. They are trained teachers who manage these kendras, and the whole business of living together and learning together is very empowering for the girls, because they learn about very many more things than just literacy skills. It was an education secretary in Karnataka who proposed that the Mahila Sangha members actually get trained and go to the Kasturba Gandhi Vidyalayas, the girls' schools, to actually bridge the gap between the school and the community, where these trained members would go and interact with the girls and would look into their problems, look into their issues, look into issues of midday meals, and so on and so forth. These trained members are referred to as Sumitras, and the Sumitras scheme has worked very well in Karnataka, where the Sumitras actually go to the schools and engage with the children in the schools, with the girl children in the schools, so that they continue within the education system. Now we look at the educational achievements of the Mahila Samakhya program. In terms of the Mahila Shikshan Kendras, there are 102 Mahila Shikshan Kendras, where there are almost 3,000 children have been enrolled in those Mahila Shiksha Kendras. And if we look at the alumni, there are almost 30,000 alumni of the Mahila Shikshan Kendras, and it's very significant that 62% of them have been mainstreamed into formal schools. Mahila Samakhya also runs alternative learning centers, and I just spoke about the Kasturba Gandhi Balika Vidyalaya and the interventions there, which started in Karnataka, but now there are 187 in 4 states. There is also the national program for girls at elementary level centers in one state, and there are 802 students enrolled in that center. Typically, women in rural areas would go to the Khap panchayats, the caste panchayats or the Jat panchayats for adjudication purposes. Whether there was a family quarrel, whether the husband left the woman and went away, whether the husband was having an extramarital relationship or the wife was having an extramarital relationship. All these kinds of community issues, domestic issues, would be sorted out by the Jat panchayats traditionally. But caste panchayats and Jat panchayats are also very gendered in the way they deliver justice, and therefore there was a need for alternative fora. And the modern courts were simply not accessible to rural women, not easily accessible to rural women, and they found it very difficult to negotiate the Indian legal system. And therefore the practice of Nari Panchayats was started in Gujarat. The Nari Adalat program is also operational in 9 states, where there are 481 Nari Adalats that have handled 30,481 cases. Like many other organizations, Mahila Samakhya also runs self-help groups, savings and credit groups, and the number is quite large. They have Mahila Samakhya has 21,825 credit groups and the membership of those credit groups is about 0.5 million, which is about 37% of the total Sangha membership. Empowerment is also about participating in political processes, that are not only confined to the Sangha. I mean, that is where the Sangha and the Federation is where the political processes are nurtured. But finally, it is members who have to go out and become part of the structures of power, such as the Panchayati Raj institutions, such as state level bodies, the state legislatures and parliament. Through the educational processes of Mahila Samakhya, women move from a state of disempowerment to feeling increasingly empowered to enter the structures of power. Now, part of this entering of the structures of power happens at the sanghas and the federations. What we will be seeing now is a video clip of a Karnataka election of the Mahila Federation, where the candidates, the people who are going to stand for elections for the federation, one of the first methods of engaging in the political process is also to participate in the structures that have been created for monitoring programs by the government. One of the structures is the school management committee, where every state-run school is expected to have a school management committee on which parents are representatives. Mahila Samakhya members actively participate in the school management committees, monitoring programs like the midday meal program, where the teachers attend the class, what the teachers teach, and so on. 30,377 Sangha members are present on school management committees. Participation in Panchayati Raj institutions, about 30,090 members, Mahila Sangha members, have actually contested Panchayat elections, and 12,905, a good 43%, have actually been elected to the Panchayats. Three elements in the education of women, in adult education and in the education of women, are access, inclusion and empowerment. What we see here in Mahila Samakhya, in the Mahila Samakhya experience, is that not only has it enabled women from oppressed groups and women in general to enroll to enable them to access the formal education system, provided alternatives that have included them in alternate education systems, and have implemented a program of empowering education that has enabled women to enter the spaces that did not accommodate them earlier. To enter those spaces as a matter of right, as a matter of entitlement, make more informed choices, and that I think is a very important contribution that Mahila Samakhya has made. About a year ago, the government of India proposed to shut down the Mahila Samakhya program and to integrate it with another national mission. And it is 100,000 postcards from Mahila Samakhya members across the country that they sent to the Prime Minister that actually resulted in the continuation of the program and as an educational program. I think that there can be nothing more to be said than the fact that women themselves demand that a program needs to be continued because it has value for them. Thank you.